All right, so we have completed step 1, step 2, step 3. We know what our goal is, we know what our constraints are, we know what our current situation is. So we know where we need to go, we know what the gap is, and we know what our challenges will be. That leads us into step number 4, where we need to put together a plan. We have to come up with something that is going to help our good friend Peter get through this PRRS situation. So we're going to develop and implement solutions. There is another checklist in the 5-step program that we need to go through and lay out a plan of attack. So this all started, as Gloria explained to us, from bringing in PRRS positive gilts. We don't want to do that anymore. So how are we going to do that? We are going to work with Jordi and come up with a program to test the gilts before they come into our farm to make sure that after all of this work to recover from the PRRS, that we don't expose Peter to an infected gilt that brings a new strain into the farm. As you remember from Gloria's presentation, the farm has some biosecurity challenges. We won't fix all of those immediately, but the owner has committed to improving the biosecurity protocol for the visitors, to having a more stringent approach to bringing people into the farms. The owner also is implemented in a management strategy for the immunity on the farm, and the owner is committed to making sure that we have antibodies in the gilts and the sows. We're going to use vaccination for PRRS in the gilts 2 to 3 times after they are delivered, and we will do a maintenance vaccination of the sows 3 times a year going forward. Now notice that the piglets have a question mark on them. And I would say one of the most common questions we get at this point is, should I vaccinate the piglets with an MLV? Is it appropriate for me to vaccinate my piglets going forward? The farmer wants us to put together an approach and convince the farmer whether we think it is a good idea or a bad idea. So that is one of the questions we need to answer in the plan. Another very common question is LVI, serum exposure, wild type virus exposure. The farmer has heard from other farmers in the area that that is a common practice and that has been very successful for a lot of other farmers for some time. Why would you go to buy a vaccine when you have all this PRRS virus already on the farm that you could use to create immunity? And so the farmer is curious about it. The farmer wants to know more information, wants to understand the data and the science behind LVI. What are the good things about it? What are the bad things about it? So Daniel, if you could join me here on stage, let's start to help educate this farmer on this question. We'll skip the MLV and piglets for now, but let's talk about the LVI versus MLV, the pros and the cons.
Another very typical question, right? It's concluded that we're going to do something. You heard from Dr. Spronk, you heard from Dr. Wetzel. If you don't do something, your piglets are going to carry anywhere between $9 and $13, $14 per pig throughout eternity, right? So you got to do something. And then the first question is, what are we going to do with our sow farm first? Because we got to produce negative pigs. And then for the sow farm, the question is, am I going to homogenize the exposure to PRRS virus using the wild type virus or the vaccine, which is the attenuated virus? We're going to talk about that, but first we're going to see here, trying to understand what we're trying to do as veterinarians as we think about this process of homogenizing the infection. We heard from Dr. Spronk that a farm can get infected in many different ways. Could be through aerosol, could be direct contact, could be indirect contact. It doesn't matter what happens. When each pig gets infected, they go through this cycle. The first one is they're going to develop viremia. How do you know they're viremic? You just test by PCR. Anything that comes from the blood could be the tongue fluids, could be the processing fluids, could be the serum itself. We expect that viremia is going to peak in around 5, 7 days post-infection. It's going to last until about 30, 35, 40 days post-infection. as herd immunity, or as the immunity, protective immunity kicks in, that viremia is going to drop, but that doesn't mean that the pigs are not shedding anymore. They're still going to shed the virus all the way from about 24 hours or so post-infection to, say, 2 or 3 months post-infection, Clayton. This is all there is variability. Some pigs are going to shed for more, some for longer, but in general, about 2 to 3 months is what we expect their shedding period to be. And how do we test that? Not with blood anymore. Got to be some sort of oral fluids or something, or nasal cavity fluids, something that's going to measure that shedding coming out of the piglet. Then, again, protective immunity kicks in again, and that shedding period is over. Does that mean that the pig is naive again? Unfortunately, no, right? We all know that the viremia is resolved, then shedding is resolved, then you still have virus kind of residing somehow in the lymphoid tissues or tonsils, for example, for months. It could be 5, 6, 7 months, and the virus is still there, not active, not viremic, not shedding. But if you have some co-infections, think about an influenza infection, think about environmental scenarios, could be cold, could be heat, could be something that's stressed the pigs, and virus gets reactivated again, and now you restart with the shedding and viremia cycle. Then another thing that happens is they start to develop antibodies, particularly against the nucleocapsid protein, and that's detected by ELISA. As we know, ELISA for PRRS, it doesn't detect any protective immunity. It does detect prior exposure to the virus. And they will seroconvert pretty quickly. About a week, 10 days post-infection, there should be seropositive, and that seropositivity lasts for 6, 7 months. And so after herd closure, it's not unexpected to see pigs starting to become seronegative for that ELISA kit some 5 to 6 months post-infection. This all happens at the individual level, at the peter level, but we know that not all peters get infected at the same time. We have piglets being born every day, we have incoming gilts, we have some other pig and people flow happening. At the population level, you have, if you don't intervene, you have that the pigs in different stages of that viremia, of that shedding, of that transmission, and that's why we want to do something. And now coming back, Clayton, to we need to influence that infection dynamics curve, that shedding curve, and we expect that if we start the clock for everybody in the population at the same time, we're going to achieve that immunity. And then the next question is, Clayton, you as a practicing vet, what do you take in consideration? How do you think about LVI versus MLV in the gilts or sows?
Yeah, Daniel, I think the gilts versus sows is the first thing that we have to be specific about, because there are really two common situations where you may consider to use serum. One is for your incoming gilts, as like a maintenance program. The gilts come in maybe naive. If you still have the wild type virus on your farm, some farmers consider to use the serum to all the gilts coming in as their way to get them infected, but try to get them to recover as fast as possible. The other way that producers consider maybe LVI is in the face of an outbreak. Okay? Not for maintenance of routine gilts coming in forever and forever, but oh no, I have an outbreak. All of the peters are breaking out with PRRS, and I need to homogenize. LCH, load, close, homogenize. So they bring a bunch of animals in the farm, they close, and they say, oh, I want to make sure I have a day 0, right? I want to make sure I know the day all of the peters in the farm, they got infected. And therefore, maybe I use LVI to do that. So those are, I think, Daniel, the two considerations we need to help the farmer understand is, as he hears from his neighbors, his farmer friends, that it's an option. Well, we need to talk specifically about those two situations. Fortunately, we have some data where we can look at the pros and cons of LVI and MLV. Both of them will create immunity, right? If we test the ELISAs, if we measure the exposure status, we will find antibodies after either one. If we expose Peter with serum, we will find antibodies. If we expose Peter with MLV, we find antibodies. So both will create the antibodies. I think we have to consider maybe the consequences of both of them. So on the left side, let's look at the first question, which is using the ongoing incoming gilts as our population for the serum. So in this evaluation, a producer had 2,000 total gilts. 2,000 gilts that they wanted to create antibodies against PRRS. They took 1,000 of the gilts and they made 1,000 of the gilts positive with LVI. No MLV, just LVI. These gilts had not been bred. They're going to go to the farm. The other 1,000 gilts, they use MLV to create the immunity. I don't need to go through and read every single production metric, right? But we start with 1,000 gilts in both populations. You can see the difference in mortality. Obviously, the LVI has some consequence, right? Some of the gilts are going to die if you give them serum and you have especially a virulent virus. Look at the average daily gain, the feed efficiency. Look at the number of gilts that got bred, okay? LVI wrecked almost half of the gilts in this situation. Not half of them died, but they didn't meet the criteria to be eligible to breed. Their quality was that bad. Look at the farrowing rate. Look at the total born. So in every situation, we see MLV creates the antibodies and in a safer way allows the normal production to continue. Now let's look at the situation number 2, where load, close, and homogenize. We have to homogenize with something. So we have serum or MLV. Same thing again. We will create antibodies. We will create a day 0 with either one. We look at the total piglets lost. This is a common metric we use to measure the outbreak impact. How many total wean pigs disappeared? How many pigs did the robber get from us? And obviously, the less pigs, the better. So with MLV, again, we see a safer result. We see less total losses from farms that use MLV as their homogenization method than farms that use LVI. So if the goal is make more pigs, which in most situations, most economic considerations, that is the goal, it's the safer option. So I think those are the facts, Daniel, that we can share with the farmer. Could use either one. In either scenario, both create the antibodies. One is a little bit safer and has a little less risk involved with it.
And a little bit about why do we think that happens, right? Clayton, here is, we heard from Jordi early on the importance about sequencing, and we've been doing some sequencing. We've been hearing Jordi, and doing sequencing from LVI material. It's not rare, we kind of talked about that, to find multiple viruses in the sample. Multiple PRRS viruses in the sample. Beyond PRRS, parvo, circovirus, and some names of viruses that I don't, to be honest with you, completely know what it does there. Viruses that we sequence, here are the results, but the sample is very rich in terms of genetic diversity there. If we focus only on PRRS, it's not uncommon to find 2, 3, 4 viruses. And here we represent each virus, each unique sequence or a strain as a color. So if in the serum sample, you are exposing the pig, the Peter, to 3 different viruses, what's gonna happen? The viruses are gonna replicate. That's a nice magic trick. The pigs are going to replicate, and once they reach the same cell, what's gonna happen? What's a magic keyword? Recombination. So what's recombination? It's nothing more than exchange of RNA particles of the same virus. They get different viruses get in the cell. They replicate. They recombine. They exchange genetic information, and the resulting viruses are a combination of those 3 parental strains. If the number inside demonstrates their replication potential, a lot of those resulting recombinant viruses are just not fit. They lose their ability to replicate, to shed and spread to the next cell. So most of them are going to die out in the population. It's that same concept of Darwin, Charles Darwin, of the survival of the fittest, right? Where you have multiple viruses that are alike, but they're not completely the same. And some viruses represented here in this 150 here is just going to be more efficient at replicating. It's just more fit to the population. So it's going to happen. The macrophages here in Peter's body, they're going to select the viruses that are just more efficient at replicating. And then the resulting viruses are just going to be more aggressive because they're just more effective at what they do, which is replicating in macrophages, destroying the macrophages, jumping to the next cell. And so this is some of why we think, Clayton, that the LVI is causing that problem, because we're helping them to evolve, we're helping them to select the ones that are more fit in the population, right? So I think I talked a lot about here in the previous slide. Can you summarize for us here what we've been talking about regarding MLV and LVI?
So I think as we share this with the farmer, we maybe don't want to be overly technical in describing recombination and all the risk, but we can describe to the farmer that if we use the LVI, what are we going to expose Peter to? Everything. Is there some consequence to that? Absolutely. Not only consequence on the PRRS side, right? You saw the MLV versus LVI, the total losses, the number of gilts we can breed, but also how much PCV2 is in that LVI, how much other pathogens, the viruses, Daniel, that we can't pronounce, and the ones we don't even know, the ones that don't have names, right? So it has some danger we have to be honest with them about, and can result in more pig losses than using MLV. MLV gives us a consistent approach, and MLV has shown time and time again to have cross protection against the many strains that we deal with. Carlos is going to talk to us later today about a challenge trial with the Rosalia strain. I give the Boehringer team so much credit for every time we have a new bad virus, whether it's in the US and it's the variant strain as we call it, or the Rosalia strain here. They do the challenge models. And not to say that there is not some level of disease, but we improve the viremia. We improve the lung lesions. We improve the average daily gain. It's been shown time and time again across many, many different isolates. And so we can use that to create immunity without the adverse effects of LVI. That's the bottom line that we need to tell to this producer. So Daniel, let's go to question number 2, okay? Piglet vaccination. He understands the difference between LVI and MLV, and I don't think he's considering LVI for the piglets, right? That's not a common practice anywhere in the world. But the piglets, should we vaccinate them with MLV? Is there an economic value proposition there? Let's maybe start with like the biology of it.
We're going to start with the simple stuff, and then we can bring Lance to the advanced economics, right? Okay. So like Clayton said, there are many studies at the university level, at the vet clinic level, commercial level. We could spend the whole day talking about that research. These are the take homes. We understand that what does the vaccine do? Do we expect sterilizing immunity? Do we expect that the pigs are not going to be infected? Do we expect that pigs are going to be completely robust to the wild type virus? No, and no. But what we do know is that, like Clayton said, that it does significantly reduce shedding of the wild type, whether you vaccinate the pigs before they get infected or as they get infected. So it's a tool that has been demonstrated over and over against strains in different parts of the world. So it's a good tool for biocontainment and for regional control. Right? Because it's going to reduce that pressure of infection for that population that's being vaccinated, but also to the surrounding sites. In the US today, it's not rare to find sow farms, right? Owners or producers of sow farms who also own or have management sayings or decisions about the surrounding finishing sites. And what are they going to do with those finishing sites surrounding the sow farms is you vaccinate those because you're going to reduce the pressure of infection, and then the risk of the sow farming being infected is reduced. So reduce the shedding and reduce the pressure of infection of the wild-type strains, whether is preventively vaccination or vaccinating ahead of the infection. So that's the basic, and we all like numbers, right? As they say back home, the answer is money. What's the question? So for that, we are going to have Lance to come over here and talk to us more about that. Hey, wait a minute, that's not Lance, that's an imposter. So, there you go. That looks more like you, Lance.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Well, thank you all again for being here. Yes, so here's the real picture. Picture within a picture, so that way you know that you're getting the real deal. What we're going to be talking about today, of course, is wean pig vaccination. And it's very fortunate that this venue is in a casino and that we've had a magician here showing us some card tricks, because I titled this Stacking the Deck in Your Favor. And so, we're all not magicians like Alex, but we can use certain techniques, certain methods of studying these things economically so that we can ensure that we have the highest chance of success. We never know what card we're going to be given from the deck, but we can ensure that that card has a better chance of being in our favor. So, I think we're going to start with a quick question, though. What is the main objection to not vaccinate your pigs for PRRS from your perspective? So, do we have the questions for the Slido, or do I just skip it? Okay. There we go. Got a couple of participants in there. So you're starting to see a pattern emerge. Cost being the number one concern. There we go, I think that's good, so we can. So it looks like costs are the predominant response, and we see different variations of the cost in labor, cost, return on investment, euros, dollars, money, the price. There's a lot of different ways to say the same thing, so I think we can go back to the slideshow. So cost is the big objection to vaccinating wean pigs. And I think to get around that objection, we really need to change our way of thinking about vaccinating wean pigs. And the first way we change is by understanding that we live in a world of probabilities. So what do I mean by that? Well, everything from weather, crop conditions, prices, genetic performance, disease outbreak and how severe it is. I mean, you think of it, anything you can name, there's a certain realm of chance to that. Is it going to rain tomorrow? Is it not? Are prices going to be up, or are they going to be down? And so there is an element to this where once we see that everything is kind of more probabilistic in nature, our goal then is to manage that probability. We want to reduce the chances of a bad outcome and increase our chances of a good outcome. We're starting to stack the deck in our favor. So let's look at disease and probability. So thinking about it in terms of probability, we see that there can be a range of possible disease impacts. How frequently the disease breaks, and what kind of cost that will be on the farm. because no two farms that get PRRS are going to have the exact same economic outcome. So there's a range of possible options that could happen there. And disease can break at any time. Disease does not care whether prices are good or prices are bad. So it can coincide with poor market conditions. It can coincide with you trying to maybe hit some sort of production goal. Maybe you have a contract with the slaughter plant to produce so many finished pigs, and so having a disease outbreak challenges that. Or maybe you export pigs across borders, and so there are certain health requirements that you are required to meet. Disease doesn't care about any of that. And so we see that the outbreak of disease can really have an impact in terms of negative events. So as we go through this, I think it's important that we really consider the cost of PRRS. And so from our talk earlier, we talked about this. We have first accounting costs. These are things that you're going to find in your financial statements. They're going to be things like feed, labor, medication, and they reduce profits because they increase money outflows. The other side of cost are economic costs or opportunity costs. These are not reported in financial statements because it's money that you could have made. You know, if you have a decrease in growth rates, that doesn't show up as a line item in a financial statement. Your pigs were growing slower, so you sold fewer in a year. So it's money that could have been made, but you didn't. So when we're talking about the cost of PRRS, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here, it's the economic costs and the accounting costs. That's going to be your total cost of disease. And so for this presentation and for the advice we're giving to the farmer in our case study, we're really going to focus on some of the economic costs, since those are not so obvious. We're going to look at mortality. That's going to be fewer pigs marketed in a year, so fewer kilograms. Growth rate, that means it's going to take our pigs longer to get to a market weight, so we're selling fewer pigs, fewer kilograms in a year. And then we're also going to look at the standard deviation of growth rates. And so, as I mentioned in the breakout session, this is going to impact the value of each kilogram marketed. So we see an impact on total output and then the average value received per kilogram. So let's do a quick review of why variation matters. I alluded to talking more about this in the breakout session, so let's get into the details of it. So if we think about it, from the very beginning, it's the consumer that really drives the value of pork. Their preferences for different types of pork, pork belly versus loins, ribs, so on, drive the value of those cuts. And so what happens is meat processors who operate at a very high fixed cost, in order for them to remain profitable, they have to not only sell a lot of pork, so it's about throughput for them, but they are trying to sell high value pork that consumers want. So how do they achieve this goal? They do it through what's called a packer matrix. And what a packer matrix is it's an adjustment to the base price or market price of the pig based on weight and maybe some other carcass characteristic. So if the pig is too heavy or too light, it will receive a penalty to that price. So let's look at a few examples from around the world. Here's one from the US. So we see that this packer matrix is comprised of weight, carcass weight in pounds over here, lean percent. And so right here in this region, we see that the pigs that are marketed there at that weight and at that lean percent receive an additional $3.50 per 100 pounds of weight. As soon as you start to leave that region, you'll receive either a smaller bonus to the base price to eventually receiving a penalty. And the penalties can become very dramatic. And so if you think back to the breakout session, I showed that profit curve, profit optimization, and the green curve kind of went up and bent down. What gives it that shape is this Packer matrix. Here's the high point of the green curve, and then we see the price for lightweight pigs increases, then the pigs pass that high point, and it starts to decrease. And this isn't just in the US. Here's an example from Korea. So pigs at a certain weight range and with a certain amount of back fat will receive, if they're in that ideal region, 113% of the base or market price. And as you leave that region, it's a smaller bonus to the price, and then eventually you will start to receive less than the market price. Here's an example from here in Europe. So we have a very small region. So if we think of that curve, there's our high point, and then it very quickly drops off on either side. It doesn't have to, some Packer matrices do not include other carcass characteristics. They can be based just on weight. So here's an example again from the US that goes just off of weight. These two over here are from China, where we see just weight, and then the percent of base price, and then a grade, where in this case it doesn't even use weight at all, just lean percent and back fat. And then based on the grade received, that influences the market price. So let's take a look at what exactly the practical implications of this would be. So let's say we send a truckload of pigs to the slaughterhouse. The average weight of that group is 127 kilograms, but there's variation around that. Yes, the average is 127, but not every pig on that truck weighs 127 kilograms. Let's assume that we have a standard deviation of 12.7 kilograms. That means that due to the variation in weight, some of those pigs are receiving a penalty. That average penalty comes out to $5 per head. So this is the impact on the average value received. So you would look at the market price, subtract $5 from it. There's your new price. So what we're going to look at on this chart is what would happen if, so we start at 12.7 kilograms, what if we went to 13 and then 14 and so on? How much value would we lose? It would look something like this. So if you remember from the most recent breakout sessions, when they discussed percent tops, this is what they're referring to. What percent of pigs landed in here, and what percent of pigs landed in these penalty regions? So we can see that as more pigs fall into the penalty, you can quickly lose a lot of money. And we know that disease greatly increases variation in weights. There we go. Okay, so let's just kind of recap our understanding of cost of disease. So there's no such thing as a single impact. It's going to be a range of possible impacts. So we have to prepare for that. When it comes to controlling disease, we have to realize that we're only controlling the probability of disease breaking, or the probability really of a bad economic outcome. Economic costs are going to be the most significant cost that comes from disease. And variation is kind of the overlooked cost of disease. You know, it's not until fairly recently that we've started to really look in detail at the cost of increased variation. So if you're studying the cost of disease on your farm, try to figure out the cost of variation. Because if you leave it out, you're going to be underestimating the cost of disease. So now that we kind of have a theoretical framework of how to look at the cost of disease, let's go back to our case study farm and try to answer some of the questions that the owner has. And the biggest question, and the same one that you all came up with, is cost. So what we're trying to do is balance a known cost, the cost of vaccination, versus the unknown cost of disease. How can we do that in a way that is useful, insightful, and can help us improve our decision making? So we talked to the owner, and we discover that it's going to cost us €4.50 per head to vaccinate each weaned pig. So that's the cost of the dose of vaccine, the supplies, the manpower to go and vaccinate each of those pigs. And we look through farm records, we look at some publications, and we come up with a range of impacts, because we say, okay, we know that, based on the type of strain that you have and so on, the least impact on average daily gain, mortality, variation in weights, etc. The most mild impact we could expect would be €4.06, and we think a very severe outbreak could be as high as $14.85. So during the roundtable, when we talked about making assumptions, like I said, try to use farm data. Where you don't have farm data, you can look at publications, talk to experts, come up with this range of costs. And if possible, you might even try to calculate a distribution, so that way you would have a probability associated with the values between 4 and 14 euro. We look at combat, and we say, okay, we have an idea that we are most likely going to have an outbreak about every 1.5 years. So here's our starting information. How can we balance that $4 or €4.50 versus this range of costs with an outbreak that might occur once every 1.5 years? Well, we know that the owner of the farm just put new construction in. And so he says, I want you to do this economic analysis over a 10-year timeline, because in 10 years I'll have to make major repairs. It's kind of the useful lifespan of some of the additions. So from there we say, okay, well, we know that we have an outbreak every 1.5 years, which translates into an outbreak about every 3.1 turns, or 3.1 times the barn is turned over, a new group of weaned pigs comes in. So 3.1 turns, we're looking at 21 turns over a 10-year period. So now we have our time frame, which means that on average, we would expect 6 to 7 outbreaks on this farm. So that would be somewhere in here. So here's the cumulative cost of those outbreaks. So it could be as low as 24 euro or as high as 104 euro. So that's nice information, that's good, but we still need more to complete this picture so that the owner can make an informed decision. So let's look at expected values. So is the average really a good number? Like I said, 6 to 7 outbreaks, is that useful enough for us? Well, we can transform that. We can say, if there's on average going to be an outbreak every 3.1 turns, another way of saying that is there's about 32% chance that there will be an outbreak at any given group. So we can put that into a binomial distribution using something just as simple as Excel and generate a distribution of possible outbreaks. So now we have a probability for each outbreak. There's less than a 1% chance that there'll be only one outbreak. For 2 outbreaks, 1.4, and so on. So now we have probability of the number of outbreaks to expect. So what we can do, we have our cumulative cost chart. We have the probability of outbreaks. What if we combined these two sets of information? Well, it would look something like this. Where suddenly, at very low probabilities, the chart goes flat. At higher probabilities, we see a steep increase. And so we'd say, well, here at kind of the central density of our outbreaks, so from 4 to 9, that's 84% of your occurrences. So you have an 84% chance to have 4 to 9 outbreaks, which means that once we adjust for that probability, here's our new range of possible costs, €2 to €84. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. We have more information to make a decision on. But how do we now compare this to the cost of vaccination? Well, if we were to take this curve and just subtract from it the cumulative cost of vaccination, which we said was €4.50 per head, there we go. So we're going to subtract our €4.50 per head for a total vaccine cost from our cost of disease curve, and we wind up with a chart that looks like this. I guess the clicker is not my friend today. There we go. So now here's our new, this is our lower bound for mild cases, our upper bound for severe cases. Here is break even. So let's fill those in. And it would look something like this. So in the green area, vaccination is a net positive, an economic benefit to the farm. In the orange area, it's an economic loss to the farm. And so we'll put in markers here for number of outbreaks. So we can see over here where there's a pretty good chance that vaccination is not a good decision. We would have to have less than 3 outbreaks, and they would have to be mostly severe or minor outbreaks. And so if we add up the total area of the green, it's 93%. So 93% of the time, vaccination provides a net economic benefit, which means that only 7% of the time, it provides an economic loss. And again, we can tell the owner that that's only going to be when you have 4 or fewer outbreaks, and they all have to be pretty mild. So now you can make a much more informed decision on whether vaccination is the right choice for your farm. So we know that 7% of the time, we would expect to lose up to €2.50 per head. 93% of the time, we would expect to gain up to $8.71 per head. So we can just do a weighted average, which gives us our final answer. €7.92 is the expected return on vaccinating weaned pigs for this farm. So let's just quickly go through a summary. Disease greatly increases the probability of negative outcomes. When analyzing the cost of disease, remember, focus on economic costs, because that's what really drives the cost of disease. We have to consider the probability of outbreaks. We can use a binomial distribution to figure out what the chances are of different numbers of outbreaks happening using combat data. And then once we have our range of disease costs and number of possible outbreaks, we can get an expected value for routine vaccination, which again, for our case study farm, is €7.92. So with that, I think we've answered the economic question of the benefit of piglet vaccination. So that moves us on to the next question. Does my vaccine protect against highly pathogenic PRRS strains? And so to answer this question, I'm going to call Oliver up to the stage, and I think he's going to set us up for this next section. So thank you, Oliver. Thank you.
A lot of money in the piggy bank. We were very excited to have our next speaker share with you some very, very new information. Dr. Carlos Vilalta, I think many of you know, is a researcher at CRESA. He did his PhD in Minnesota. Unfortunately, Carlos, his all-in, all-out program with the nursery and his kids has not worked very well, and he is unwell. So in his place, Dr. Marius will present the work that Carlos has done at CRESA, and we all wish him a good recovery. So please, Gloria, send him a text to say, get well soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Yes, it was our idea. So on Sunday, Carlos texted me and said, well, Marius, I'm actually so under the weather, I don't know if I can make it. And I was crossing my fingers that he is still able to present virtually. And then during the lunch break, he said, even virtually is not possible for him. So this is the pretty picture of Carlos right now. He looks a little bit in a more rougher shape. And together with Carlos, he is a researcher at CRESA. We have conducted a vaccine challenge study because you may have heard about this highly pathogenic PRRS strain in Spain circulating, the Rosalia strain. So we have put this strain, actually this work was done by Carlos, putting this strain into pigs that have been vaccinated with PRRS/EU and see if the vaccine was efficacious against this highly pathogenic PRRS strain. So efficacy of PRRS/EU against the virulent PRRS strain Rosalia was the title of the study. And as you can see, Carlos is a very credible researcher. So he has organized this presentation as introduction, objectives, materials and methods, results, conclusions. Here in marketing, we would have started with the objectives and then directly jump into results. But as this is a Carlos study, I will kindly follow his proposal. This morning you have heard from Jordi about the origin of Rosalia strain. Actually, we say this is one strain, but as you can see here, that this strain composed of multiple different strains. So we heard from Daniel already how PRRS recombines, so does Rosalia. So recombination is a very natural part of PRRS replication. It contains of different strains, all merging into the strain that we know now as Rosalia. And as the strain was so highly pathogenic, it caused for significant losses to the Spanish swine industry, and concerns were raised about the efficacy of existing PRRS vaccines, and therefore this study was conducted. And we started the study by assessing and selecting the PRRS infectious dose as a kickoff of the study, and then from selecting this dose, we tested the efficacy of PRRSflex against this particular strain. And first of all, I will show you how this strain fits here into the phylogenetic tree. So the strain that we used for this study, this is based on OR5, fits directly into the center of the other Rosalia strains that are circulating in Spain. And when we take a look at the whole genome, we also see that it fits very nicely into the cluster of the Rosalia strains that are currently causing so much trouble to the swine industry. These results are from the dose-finding study. And as you can see here, we had 3 different titers, 10-4, 10-5, and 10-6. And basically all of them resulted in really low CT values, meaning lots of virus circulating in those animals, and particularly after 7 days post-challenge, you can see really CT values at the 20s, so lots of virus circulating in those pigs. And through the board, you see severe clinical challenges here in the lung, resulting in severe lung lesions. You may have not seen the metrics we have used here, it's called ratio lung weight body weight, and this is particularly important for interstitial pneumonias, such as PRRS challenge studies, because PRRS is equally distributed within the lung, causes interstitial pneumonia, edema, and then by weighting the lung and putting it into ratio to the body weight, you do get an idea about the severity of the inflammation, meaning the heavier the lung, the more impactful the challenge has been. These are just a couple of pictures of the lung ranked from pretty to very bad. As you can see here, the control animals have really pristine lungs. But when we increase the challenge dose, you can see here the interstitial pneumonia, the edema in the lung, and the pigs that have been challenged with a high dose. This is how the study was set up. In total, we had 50 pigs in this laboratory setting, 20 pigs in the groups that were vaccinated and challenged, 20 pigs in the group that received the placebo and challenged, and 10 pigs in the group that were neither vaccinated nor challenged. Challenge was conducted at 4 weeks of age. Vaccination was conducted at 4 weeks of age, and then 4 weeks later, the challenge was performed. And what is quite unique about the study, this is what I like it a lot, is that they have selected, that they followed those animals not only for 2 weeks after challenge, they followed those animals up until the end, 5 weeks after challenge. And they have selected 2 necropsy dates. So the first one is very important for lung lesions, 14 days post-challenge, and the other one was 5 weeks post-challenge. So they followed those animals over a longer period of time. These were the parameters that were monitored in the study. So clinical score, rectal temperature up until 14 days post-challenge on a daily basis, and then up until the end of the study every second day. Body weight, serum samples, blood for serology, a general health observation, necropsies, and lung evaluation. So you see this was a pretty complete study. And currently, so as soon as Carlos is getting better, he will start summarizing those results and writing a manuscript, and then this will be submitted and published in peer-reviewed literature. And this is just to give you a snapshot of the most important results of this study. So here we see the blue pigs that were vaccinated and the red pigs that were non-vaccinated, challenged 4 weeks later. So here clear seroconversion in the vaccinated pigs, and then after challenge also seroconversion in the non-vaccinated but challenged pigs. This graph I like a lot because now we are taking a closer look again to the period after challenge up until the end of the study and analyze the viremia. And what you can see clearly here is in the positive controls, the high level of viremia compared to the vaccinated pigs with PRRS Flex-EU that you can see here in the blue curve. And we see 2 things. The one thing is a way sooner recovery from viremia in the vaccinated pigs, but the other thing that is even more obvious is the magnitude of virus in the blood in the pigs that didn't receive the vaccination. And this was in the first 14 days post-challenge, this was 3 to 12 times higher in unvaccinated animals. So really a lot of virus in the blood circulating in those unvaccinated animals. In this chart, they calculated the area under the curve. So these are cumulative values for the amount of time and the viremia. And what you can see here, again, are the positive animals, which have high level of viremia for a longer period of time compared to vaccinated animals. And the differences was 10 times, so a 10-fold reduction, a 10 times reduction in vaccinated animals compared to the positive control group when we are observing the area under the curve. And now jumping to the clinical parameter, and what you can see here is the rectal temperature. This is study day 0 would be the day of challenge, and what you can see here are the blue vaccinated animals, and again the red unvaccinated animals. When we calculate those averages, you see that there is a differences in terms of rectal temperature in vaccinated animals compared to unvaccinated animals, meaning that vaccinated animals had on average lower temperature, lower rectal temperature. And when we measure the animals that had fever, we also see clear differences in the animals that received the vaccination compared to the animals that were not vaccinated, meaning they had more days of fever for a longer duration of time. Here, what they did is measuring the breathing and activity scores, and what we can see again, that laboriously breathing was more prominent in the animals. So again, study day 25, this was the day of challenge. And laboriously breathing was more prominent in animals that didn't receive the vaccination. So the red animals, you see, had more difficulties in breathing compared to the vaccinated animals. And also when we measure the level of activity, and this would be more appropriate to call it the inactivity score. And what you can see here is that animals that received the vaccination were more active as the positive control animals. And now I like the next slides a lot, because now we are taking a look at the lung lesions. And those lungs were observed macroscopically, and here you can see again the differences between the negative control group, the vaccinated, and this inflamed, edema-loaded, non-vaccinated lung. And here the team of Carles again observed the lung weight, body weight ratio. And I said in the very beginning, day 14 post-infection, post-challenge is very valuable for lung lesions. When we follow those animals for a longer time, so here we have 5 weeks post-challenge, those lung lesions mostly vanished. So day 14 post-challenge is very effective to measure the impact of the challenge. And what we can see here is a clear difference in terms of lung weight, again, between the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated animals. And those, keep in mind, we had really small number of animals in this study, and those results were nearly significant in terms of differences. The other parameter that I like a lot, for sure, is average daily weight gain. And here they have grouped the results of average daily weight gain 2 weeks post-challenge, up until 5 weeks post-challenge, and then through the entire period. And 2 things that are really obvious is you see how severe the challenge was. Here, this was again the negative control group, had average daily weight gain around 700 grams per day, and see how this drops in the animals that got infected with Rosalia. And then significant differences again to animals that have been vaccinated with Persflex-EU. So Persflex-EU was again able to mitigate the negative effect of the Rosalia challenge. What I then find really remarkable is in the time up until 5 weeks post-challenge, that we see significant differences again between the unvaccinated, unchallenged animals compared to the animals that were unvaccinated but challenged. But here, vaccinated animals were mostly capable of totally mitigating the negative effect of Rosalia in terms of average daily weight gain, meaning those animals that received the vaccine performed nearly as good as the animals that didn't even receive the challenge. So these are really impactful results. So to conclude the study, PRRSflex EU was able to reduce the viremia of the vaccinated animals. The vaccinated animals showed lower body temperature and milder clinical signs. Moreover, the duration of fever and clinical signs was shorter compared to non-vaccinated animals. The ratio of lung weight to body weight, meaning measuring the inflammation of the lung, the amount of edema, was higher in non-vaccinated animals, showing reduced inflammation in vaccinated pigs. And lastly, and I think most importantly, vaccinated animals had a 2 to 3 times higher average daily weight gain compared to unvaccinated animals. So soon you will see those results also published in scientific literature. And I'm very glad that we even have a poster at the upcoming ESPHM. So you will be able to see a poster from our colleague Sebas, who you know from the breakout session, because Sebas has seen similar results in farm, in the field in Spain. Is that right, Sebas?
Yeah. Thank you, Marius. Glad to share this field trial with you. And first of all, I would like to thank again Victoria Benedicto, which is the veterinarian with we could do this trial. And a trial that gave us valuable information about how to react in certain circumstances when we send negative piglets to high-density areas. What should we do with them? Should vaccination help us, or may help us to reduce the challenge and to improve health status and benefits. And to be brief, because as Mario said, you will have the poster in the next ESPHM, but the trial setup was in the same finishing barn, a 2,400 finishing barn, where negative piglets were placed and vaccinated at the entry in the fattening, and one group was vaccinated, and we kept one other group non-vaccinated. The natural exposure, took place 5 weeks after placement. And yes, you can see the results. Just after the infection, mortality goes up very fast, and the difference between vaccinated group and non-vaccinated group was around 12%. So vaccinated animals, mortality was around 7%, and non-vaccinated animals was close to 20%. Just some results, some brief results. We could find a less viremia, as Marius told us in the experimental challenge model, less viremia in vaccinated animals, highest homogeneity on the seroconversion in antibody titers, and we could obtain around 30 to 1 return on investment according to the improvement on average daily gain and feed conversion ratio apart mortality. So yes, we can conclude that it is worth to vaccinate animals, naive animals in high density areas in face of a challenge with a strain 17% different from the vaccine used. So good results that, as I said, will be for you in the session, poster session in the Congress.
Perfect. Thank you, Sebas. And before we're going to break for 15 minutes, I had one slide included as a reminder for myself, because not only choosing a vaccine that offers protection, also sometimes the way of application is something that you request. So we do have the needle-free application device FreeVax at our booth. So if you visit us at the next days at the ESPHM booth, you are able to observe and explore this needle-free application technology. And with that, I'm going to quickly hand over back to you, Oliver.